The situation in Israel, unfortunately, has not gotten better. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected a ceasefire offer by Hamas. In fact, the Israeli military has really ramped up its operations in attacking Gazans and specifically residential and office buildings in the Gaza Strip. Israeli media reported that the security cabinet, comprising of Benjamin Netanyahu, defense minister, and alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz, Israel Defense Forces Chief and Staff Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi, and several others agreed to elevate the offensive in Gaza amid an understanding that the military operation would go on for another week. So again, Netanyahu rejects a ceasefire offer from Hamas. They agree to ramp up their military operations. Israel has struck over 350 targets in Gaza. 2 infantry brigades were sent to the area, indicating preparations for a possible ground invasion in the Gaza Strip. And Benny Gantz, who is the alternate prime minister, had a warning for the Palestinians, and it was brutal. We're gonna first show you the video, and you can read the subtitles. When we come back, I'll go ahead and read some of his statement for our podcast audience.
שר הביטחון, ואם האלימות של חמאס לא תיפסק, המכה של 2021 תהיה קשה וכואבת יותר מזו של 2014. ראשי החמאס נושאים באחריות לכך שבמקום להתכונן לחג, אתם ספונים בבתים. לצערנו הם פועלים ממרחב אזרחי, ולכן הנזק יהיה גדול ועוצמתי. הם מקריבים אתכם בגלל הצרכים האישיים שלהם. אם בישראל ישנו במרחבים מוגנים, אז התבער, אין משוואה אחרת. אף מדינה בעולם לא תאפשר לירות טילים על אזרחיה, בוודאי שלא ישראל, בוודאי שלא אני.
So the relevant parts of his statements include that the Israeli strikes of 2021 will be harder and more painful than those of 2014, the last time the violence was pretty intense. And he also said that if citizens of Israel have to sleep in shelters due to Hamas rocket attacks, then Gaza will burn. Cenk.
Okay, well, if you don't know, Benny Gantz was the more moderate of the candidates. He's the one that just threatened. People get touchy on the words. You know what's more touchy is when you burn Gaza to the ground. That's a little bit more touchy, but people get less touchy about that in America. But when I say you're threatening to burn a civilian population down is an act of genocide, I'm sure people would catch feelings over that. Like, no, you're not allowed to say that. What's more important? What I'm calling it, or whatever the hell you want to call it, or him actually doing it? Now, look, oftentimes in the Middle East is complicated. Not this one. This one is super simple on 2 fronts. Number one, Netanyahu failed to form a government, and then he attacked Al-Aqsa Mosque. Clearly, the most obvious provocation I've ever seen in this conflict or almost any conflict. There was no question that Netanyahu's government started it. And obviously there was the ethnic cleansing of Sheikh Jarrah, and that's been going on for some time. But the Al-Aqsa Mosque attack right after Netanyahu couldn't form the government makes this the plainest, most simple scenario you've ever seen in the Middle East. So, and he did it, by the way, there's 7 Israelis dead, including a 6-year-old kid. Netanyahu has that blood on his hands. He's a monster, and our support of him here in the United States is morally depraved. So all those people dead, including all those Israelis, by the way, of course, over 80 dead among the Palestinians, and over, how many kids these days? The 16 kids dead on the Palestinian side. Because Netanyahu didn't want to endanger his political career. But I want to give you one more detail about that that's really important. Now it's on the other folks to form a government. And one of the people that the more moderates, and by the way, again, Benny Gantz, the guy who just said, I'm gonna burn Gaza, is the more moderate person in Israeli politics these days, unfortunately. So the moderates were thinking of forming a government with an Arab coalition, because of course 20% of Israel is Arab in terms of the citizens. And well, now that makes it very, very difficult because Netanyahu started a war where now the people are literally tearing each other apart in the streets. So now if you say, hey, I want to work with an Arab coalition, that's going to seem unseemly. And then Netanyahu's going to call for another election. And then, hey, look, I won. It's me. His personal corruption is sickening. And if you're an Israeli, you should be furious at Netanyahu, let alone Gantz. So now the second part that's easy is, if you keep wondering who's at fault, the powerful or the powerless, the occupied or the occupiers, you're blind. You're blinded by, for whatever reason, because of American propaganda, and you grew up watching mainstream media in this country, which is viciously anti-Palestinian, or you have certain biases for whatever reason. And by the way, that happens, and people are human, okay? I always use my own example. I have Turkish family and friends who are perfectly progressive, but you talk about the Kurds and the Kurdish situation in Turkey, and they instantly become the most nationalistic people you've ever seen. Those are natural human biases, but I'm trying to help you get past them, okay? So this is not a small occupation, this is not a temporary occupation. It's been over 50 years of keeping these people in an open air prison. So there's no question who's at fault. The powerful are at fault for crushing the powerless. It doesn't matter that it's Israel or Palestine. You can substitute any nationality there and it doesn't matter. The people being kept in an open air prison for 54 years at least, they are not the ones at fault in the general big picture. If you keep saying, well, they tried to defend themselves, these monster terrorists. How about the bombs raining down all over Gaza? And there's some incredibly heartless people here in America go, well, why don't they go somewhere else? There is nowhere to go, it's a prison. I need you to understand it because mainstream media is not clear enough. They cannot leave Gaza. There's a blockade. There's a fake independence in Gaza. They do not control their own borders. It is a prison. There are 2 million people trapped there. Now they're dropping bombs in an open air prison.
Right.
Killing, and saying, I'm gonna burn Gaza. And look, guys, so now again, I'm gonna make people uncomfortable by pointing out just simple facts. So we have an Israeli defense minister threatening to burn people alive in order to protect the homeland. If that's not deeply ironic, I don't know what is. And my heart breaks for those Palestinians who are murdered on a regular basis and imprisoned for decades. But my heart also breaks for what has happened to Israel. And if you don't believe me, that's okay. If you don't believe that, it doesn't matter. There's nothing you could say that gets anybody to believe anything. But it was better than this. And for Palestinians, you might think it was never better than this. And I hear you loud and clear. But we had a prayer of Israel being a wonderful state that was a refuge for Jews all across the world. But this brutality and honestly, what do you, look, every time I struggle with a word, so is it fascism or is it not fascism to keep people imprisoned for over 50 years and say, you are not allowed to govern yourself because you're inferior to us. You are violent. If we ever give you freedom, you will definitely do violence because you are savages. And why? Oh, Muslims. You know how Muslims are. Look, Ed, I'm gonna say one last thing, and this one's personal. My whole life when discussing this issue, people have told me constantly, we can't let the Palestinians go because they'll attack us, they're violent. And it's because of their religion. And I took it like, oh, that's normal. I'm in America, that's normal. It didn't even occur to me that they were saying things that were openly bigoted towards me. I have a Muslim background. I'm atheist now, but I grew up Muslim. My family's Muslim. My aunts, uncles, grandparents, they were all Muslim, right? And they say, well, Muslims are violent. We cannot give them freedom. We must never give the Muslims freedom because they don't say you, but I'm Muslim. They say it right to my face. You Muslims are too violent. That's why we have to bomb you and murder you and imprison you. God damn it, don't do that, Israel. Don't do that. Look at what you're doing. Not only to the Muslims, but to yourself. And the murder never stops and the imprisonment never stops. And there's always an excuse, a convenient excuse. Oh, somebody threw a stone, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Now we imprison them for more decades. Here, I'm gonna say one more thing, go ahead. So if your feelings are hurt over it, that's okay, but these are facts, and I don't know what the exact non-extreme analogy to make is. But I'm gonna ask you a moral question, and I want you to think about it. If a slave were to throw a stone at the master's house, is the slave morally culpable? I don't know the answer. You think that's an easy answer. In the old days, it was an easy answer. Of course he's morally culpable, America said. The abolitionists that called for violence were morally culpable. They were terrible, evil people. We had to fix slavery in a different way. Did we? No. We fixed it with a gigantic civil war where hundreds of thousands of people died. Because the powerful would not stop oppressing the powerless. And the minute they picked up a stone, you're the savages. What did they call black people in this country? What did they call them? They called them savages. They said they were more violent as they whipped them, as they killed them. And so now, by the way, the other answer is not easy either. They pick up a stone and they throw it. What if it hits the master's kid? He didn't do it, it's not his fault, he's innocent. What if the kid dies? You know how you fix an unfixable problem like that? You free them and you treat them as human beings. That's how you do it. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, I think the area where there seems to be delusion and disagreement in the United States is the idea that this is somehow a fair conflict. Fair meaning that it's not in any way asymmetrical. But obviously there's a huge disparity of power here that needs to be addressed when talking about this conflict. That part of the discussion, for as long as I've covered this story, as long as I've known about this conflict, has been missing in the American context of the debate. But what's giving me a little bit of hope, and I never thought I would say that in regard to this story, is that it does appear that the conversation is changing and people are becoming far more aware of the asymmetrical nature of this conflict.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.